So welcome everyone who's joining us, and those of you who are joining us later on the video. We realized a little too late, thanks to the Giants losing their game yesterday, that today would be the season-ending, very important game to decide who wins the division. So if you're watching the game, we are just in great hope that the Giants are going to do it today. And if you're joining us later, you can always send comments and questions, and we can reach out to Jeni if you have anything that you'd like to connect with her about. But we are just so, did I turn this on? I did, yes, good. Yeah. We are just so honored and delighted to have Jeni with us today. She helped found and start Teens Connect, which is just an incredible organization in our community, which is now under the umbrella of Mentis. And I just can't wait to hear more. We're just really excited to be able to continue this conversation, to learn more about what it is that your organization does, and also just what you've seen in the community, and what we can learn from you. And we have this heart and this desire to reach out. We know that life is difficult for a lot of young people these days, and we want to know how as adults in the community we can be a support and support the work that you do. So welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is this close enough, my mic? Can you hear me just fine? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Robin, so much for inviting me today. My pastor, Pete Shaw at Crosswalk, connected me with Robin, and here I am to speak. And I take every opportunity possible to speak to the community about what's going on with our teens, because it is near and dear. This work is near and dear to my heart. It's my passion. I truly feel like I'm living my calling. And I want to share that with others, to inspire others to also, to inspire others to find their calling if they haven't, or follow that voice, but also to, do work that matters, and to know and really understand what's going on with our teens, because they need all the support they can get. So I would love to start with a really super personal, vulnerable story, if it's okay with you, to kind of set the scene. I realized a couple days ago, when I started thinking about what I was going to say, and I looked up the address of St. Mary's, I realized this is where I got sober almost 11 and a half years ago.
Wow.
In this very place. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you. It was in one of the rooms over there off the courtyard, when I realized that I was an alcoholic and I found sobriety. It was here that a friend invited me to a meeting at 6:30 in the morning. And this is where I came for the first couple of years of my sobriety. So I feel so blessed and honored to be here. I feel like it's kind of a full circle story, that this is where I got sober. And after that, years later, found my calling, which I could only do in sobriety. And now I'm here sharing what I do. So I just wanted to set the scene with that and kind of set the tone. Very grateful for St. Mary's.
Thank you.
Yes. So it was, let's see, I am a trained graphic designer. I went to school and got a degree in graphics and packaging design. And I worked for 20 years in Napa running my own design business. I designed a lot of logos, print collateral, a lot of wine labels, did a lot of work for wineries. I loved being a designer. I think I was pretty good at it. I loved my clients. I had no reason to change careers. I had I have two boys. They're now 21 and 24, young men. When my younger son, Max, was in middle school at River Middle School, I knew that there was something, I was looking for something to connect him to, something bigger than himself, because I could sense that he had the tendency to sort of, be a little self-absorbed, which many teens do, many young people do. It's kind of, what their job is, right? To be self-absorbed, really focus on what they're doing and learn about life, learn how to kind of transition from being a young person to being an adult. But I knew that with my son and some of his friends, there was a need to sort of break them out of that self-absorption and show them what the real world was like. So I took him on a service trip to Honduras, and it was eye-opening for him, for me, for his friend that joined us. And from that, he came back, and he and his friend spoke at their school about the amazing transformation that they went through, the heart-opening experience they went through in Honduras, working with children living in extreme poverty. We gave shoes. We went with an organization called Souls for Souls, and we gave shoes to children living in, impoverished communities. And my son came back, and at the same time, we had recently started a club at his school called Be the Change, which was really focused on anti-bullying and service opportunities local. So this kind of fit into this greater picture I was sort of trying to introduce him to and sort of open his eyes and sort of open his heart at the same time. And after the trip to Honduras, we really decided that this club would have a volunteer aspect. And a bunch of his friends joined the club called Be the Change. Some kids from different grades. This was the middle school, so it was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I was just truly impressed by how much they made this work their own. We had an opportunity to collect underpants to send to girls in Uganda through a friend of mine who worked for the Jane Goodall organization. And girls were dropping out of school because they couldn't manage their monthly cycles because they didn't have underpants and supplies for their monthly cycle. So we helped in less than a month, with River School being kind of the school and the kids that kind of took this project on. We collected 1,000 brand new underpants that we sent with my friend to Uganda. And we did that several times. Every time she went, she was a photojournalist, we would hold a drive and collect underpants. And a few years later, there was an article written in Uganda about how this had the increase, the number of girls that were staying in school and going through school and graduating had increased by like 30%. So something so simple was life-changing for people. And because our teens could understand this, right? They could do something easy about it. They could go to Target and buy a pack of underpants. And then they saw what happened to the girls who received the underpants because my friend took pictures and sent them back. And our teens wrote letters to their African sisters. And it was just very much about relationship and awareness about what was going on. And it just opened their eyes to what happens in other parts of the world that they hadn't understood until this point. So I just was so impressed with the level of awareness and autonomy that our teens took in these projects and how it inspired them to do more for our community. We started traveling once a year to developing countries with Souls for Souls. We went on 8 service trips. We went to Guatemala, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Honduras, and all those countries except for the DR we went to more than once. And I took bigger groups of teens every time because they were so attracted to this work. And that's one thing I'll share about a little bit later, but it's one of the biggest points I want to stress today. Something that our teens desperately need in their lives is meaning and purpose. Having some kind of purpose outside of school, outside of academics and performing, something that makes their hearts and souls sing, something that makes them connect to something bigger than themselves. And service work is so amazing for that very reason. Often they do it without wanting anything in return. They're not doing it to get a good grade. They're not doing it to look a certain way. They're doing it simply because it feels good. Shortly after one of our service trips, I got the part of the St. Francis prayer tattooed on my arm, "In giving we receive," because that's so true in this work, right? So flash forward a couple years, my son and his friends who were in 7th grade at the time, we went on the first service trip. We started this club. They graduated from middle school and they all went to different high schools. And they still wanted to do this work. They didn't want to stop doing this work. So I created kind of a different version of the club that was more community oriented. And we ran it out of the Boys and Girls Club for a while. We did a lot of volunteer work for local organizations. We held drives. We did all sorts of things, worked with local churches, which is always a good fit because churches all have a service component. It was great. I loved doing this on the side of running my design business. I've always been a big volunteer, and it usually has been since my kids were born, related to whatever they're going through in their life and what stages they are in their life. So the service work, I thought this club will carry my kids through high school. It'll attract more kids. We'll pass it on to somebody else when they all graduate. And then in 2016, my son was in 10th grade at the time. We lost 2 teenagers in Napa to suicide. Joey Douglas was a 10th grader at Vintage High School, and Edwin Diaz Garcia was an 8th grader at Redwood Middle School. And they took their lives within, I think, a month, 3 weeks or 4 weeks of each other. And as you can imagine, that left our community with the questions: what's going on with our teens? What do we need to do better? Where are we missing the mark? And I was part of this conversation because of my club with teens and my kids also being teenagers. And my dear friend and mentor, Linda Inlay, who was the principal at River Middle School, and my son was there. She had retired when he moved on. It was a perfect little succession for both of them, but I'm glad she was with him through his middle school career. We got together, met for coffee. And almost at the same time, we were talking about this, what's going on? This is horrible. This is tragic. Almost at the same time, we looked at each other and we said, is anybody asking our teens what's going on? And we thought, not that we've heard of. We need to sit down and ask our teenagers what's going on, because they're the only ones that know. We can't say we know what they need. We don't have the right to say, this is what our teens need. And so we got my son and his friends, this little group together, and we just asked them the questions, a very safe environment. They knew us, they knew each other. Are you struggling? What are you struggling with? What are the sources of your stress, your anxiety, your depression? What do you need from the adults in your community? And they completely opened up to us. And these kids, some of them I'd known since kindergarten. I didn't know they were even struggling. I had no idea. My son included had gone through a bout of depression, but had not opened up about it. And when we asked the kids, why aren't you talking to your parents or to adults? And they said, we don't want our parents to worry about us. We don't think our teachers have the time. We don't feel like we have the right to feel this way. There's people in the world that have so much less than we do. We don't feel justified. But yeah, we're hurting. We're hurting and we need support. And so that was the moment, because since I got sober in 2010, this is 2016, I had been asking my higher power for a sign, some kind of, let me put this, shortly after I got sober, I had a calling to work with teens, to work with youth. And I thought at the time it was in the addiction recovery field. And so I'd gone through and, tried working with a few different organizations, tried volunteering. I had a lot of doors kind of shut. No, we don't need that right now, or this isn't the right place, not a good fit. And so I thought, okay, it's this group, that's a service group. That's my calling. I'm working with these kids, introducing them to volunteering and to service and to connection and in a global way, But then after these suicides happened, and after I started really asking our teens what was going on, I realized there's a bigger piece to this. It's not just about the volunteer work. I've spent several years now teaching our kids to learn how to give to others, but I haven't done a very good job teaching them how to give to themselves and how to take care of themselves. That's what's needed here. And so within a year, I had given up my design business and started Teens Connect, a new nonprofit. And I knew nothing about nonprofit world. I designed brochures for nonprofits, but I knew nothing about being a therapist or a teacher, or, I thought I was a good mom. I still think I'm a good mom. And I knew I connected with teens, but this was a whole new world to me. So it was a big leap of faith. But I remember the moment that I made the decision. It was late in 2016, and I had gone on 2 trips to the mountains and just sat in stillness and sort of asked, in prayer and meditation and contemplation, is this what I'm meant to do? Is this my next step? And I just got a very clear yes. And so I just jumped, and I knew that the net would appear. I knew that I would be supported. I knew desperately that the work was needed. So during that year before I started Teens Connect, I worked with a local, just a grassroots group that I helped put together, to have more conversations with our teens, to hear from teens, not just the ones I knew, hear from different age groups, hear from a diverse representation of our teens, those who, were part of the LGBTQ community, teens of different ethnicities and races, teens from different schools, teens from Up Valley and Down Valley. I wanted to really understand what is going on. And it's interesting because early on, this work really entailed trying to find out reasons, trying to find out what was going on and also what we could do. Today, 5 years later, I'm doing the exact same thing as the basis of our programs. And I hold wellness cafes. We call them wellness cafes. We get groups of young people together and we ask questions about what's going on. We've added more into the mix of teaching them coping skills to manage their anxiety, depression, because we've heard from literally thousands of teens what they're struggling with, and why, and what they need. So we're still gathering the information and giving them voice and hearing them and listening to them, which is another thing our teens really need, is validation that their feelings are real. They need confirmation and support. They don't need judgment. They don't need us to give them answers. They need to be heard, to be seen and heard. And so we give them that space. We teach them coping skills. We have a bunch of activities we bring into our wellness cafes to teach them how to manage their anxiety, how to manage their depression, how to connect with each other. And then we offer them resources that they can connect to if they're struggling with mental health, therapy, suicide hotlines. We run suicide prevention trainings with youth as often as we can, and adults. I think that's actually where we first connected. We're always open to do a suicide prevention
Yeah,
training.
we'd love to do that. We were actually scheduled to do a mental health first aid training for youth
Yes.
with you all, but
Yeah.
it was the week that the pandemic started, or like the next
That's
month
right.
after the pandemic started.
That's right. Well, we
But
can
we'd love
talk
to do
because
that
I would
again,
love
yeah.
to schedule that again. And we have a shorter version of what we offer now called QPR, Suicide Prevention Training. And I've run 3 in the past 2 weeks, and 2 of our teens have already saved somebody's life with the tools they learned. So it's a very valuable training, and it literally saves lives of people of all ages. They saved an adult's life. So anyway, I want to back up again really quickly, because when I started this work and we started holding these conversations with teens, and I decided to start a nonprofit, I knew that for the majority of teens, having a place where they could come and talk and express their feelings and be seen and heard and connect to other youth that were like-minded and feeling the same way, that's a big part of it, is community. I knew that was probably going to work for 95% of the teens, right? This was enough, but I knew that there were that small percentage of youth that were going to need more, that were going to need professional mental health treatment. And I'm not a therapist, and I wasn't planning on becoming a therapist. So I approached Mentis, and I talked to the executive director, and I told him of my vision, and that included therapy for our youth, free therapy on their school campuses. And when I kind of outlined this whole program of our prevention work and his, therapy and treatment work, it made sense to him. He saw the vision immediately. He said, "Let's do it. Let's go slow," which we didn't. I said, "Okay, that's not how I work." He said, "Let's go slow. Let's start." We found funding for 2 schools to have a therapist at their campus to provide free, accessible therapy. No insurance barriers, no transportation barriers, just therapy. And we did that. We started with 2, and in I think a little over 2 years, in 2 years we increased to 8 schools. 3 years we increased to 10 schools, and now we're at 18 schools countywide, offering free therapy to students, as well as all our prevention programs, which, as I mentioned, include the wellness cafes. Last year, we saw over 3,500 students in our programs on the schools.
Wow.
Despite the pandemic, we figured out how to offer our programs virtually, and our teachers knew that our students, our teens, our youth needed these places to talk about what was going on, because, as you know, the rates of anxiety and depression have just skyrocketed. Before the pandemic, 16% of our high schoolers in Napa County had seriously considered suicide. 44% of our LGBTQ students in high school had contemplated suicide. That was in 2019, 2020 school year.
Wow.
And it's only increased. We don't have the current data locally, but it's increased. So our teens in general are struggling with high rates of depression and anxiety. Our communities, like our LGBT communities, our BIPOC communities, some of our subgroups in Napa, our communities of color, have an increased stigma around mental health. So there's even a bigger struggle, but it's tragic. It's tragic that there's this much despair in our community, because we live in such an affluent community, and in so many ways, our community is so supportive, right? But I think part of the equation is in helping them is that they're learning how to speak out. They're learning how to break the stigma. And so I want to share one of the main components. Well, first I want to share that, so I developed this partnership with Mentis, Teens Connected Mentis. We found funding together. We started working together really closely. I joined the Mentis marketing committee because of my design background. Rob Weiss, the ED of Mentis, joined Teens Connect board. So we were very closely already working. And then this last year, he came to me early in the year and said, what do you think about merging? It's going to be a really hard road with the pandemic ahead. I think it might be time for us to have this conversation. And at first I was like, no, this is my thing. I want to protect it. And I hadn't worked for anybody since my 20s because I had my own design business and then I had my own nonprofit. But I ultimately was like, this will allow me to do this work on a greater scale. I'll have support. And since we merged, there's now, I started a prevention division at Mentis. There's now 4 of us doing this work, and we're doing it not only for youth, but for older adults, for parents. We're going to start working with elementary school kids. So we're now designing and implementing programs from prevention to treatment all across our Mentis organization, and for people of every age and stage and income level and ethnicity, everything. We offer bilingual support. 2 of our prevention specialists are bilingual. So that's where we are now with Mentis. Teens Connect still operates. Everything we did before, we do now under the Mentis umbrella. So I'm not even paying attention to the time, am I?
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay, good. I want to mention one more really important piece to our work, and that is our teen council. So early on, I sat my son and his friends down and asked them the questions, what can we do for you? And they became our first teen council. So at the time they were going, because they had graduated from middle school, they were going to different high schools. So we started with a small teen council of 12, including these high schoolers from different high schools. And they came up with their own bylaws. They came up with their own mission statement. They really are the boots on the ground task force. They're the ones who have started clubs on their school campuses, empowerment clubs that break the stigma around mental health, that connect their peers to support. They're all trained in suicide prevention. They're the eyes and ears of our youth. They continually come back with data that is so valuable to our work. They continually challenge me to do more and to do better because there's so many needs. They have the most amazing ideas that I would never think of on my own, because they're the ones that know what it's like to be a teen and what is needed. They know the things that will bring them meaning and purpose. And so they ask for those things to be designed, right, for us to do. Ever since that first teen council, we're now on our 5th version of our teen council. And it used to be that I, would encourage the first year or two, a couple of years, encourage kids to maybe try it out. One of my teens, Mackenzie, likes to say I tricked her into being on teen council. And now we have an application process because there are so many young people that want to be involved and want to be part of this work. And this year we had over 40 applications, and we have a teen council of 28 right now. So, and they're countywide. They're from American Canyon High School, all the Napa high schools, St. Helena High School, and so they really have their finger on the current pulse of what it's like to be a teen. And I couldn't do this work without them, because I would have no idea what to do. Our programs would become stale within a year, because I would keep doing things the same way. So they challenged me to do things differently and to be innovative. And I think because of my design background, I'm now designing this vision. It kind of makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to anyone else, but as a graphic designer, I was always really good about listening to my clients and what their needs were. And I'm doing that now with my teens, right? And I have 3 amazing prevention specialists at Mentis who are doing work with parents and doing work with our schools and offering all of our services and prevention programs in Spanish as well as English. And we have plans to just keep growing and keep expanding because the need is great among our entire community, not just our youth. One of our my favorite program right now that we've recently designed is called Bridging the Years. And this was back in the last winter. We realized that the 2 age groups that were struggling the most with social isolation was teens and older adults. So we connected them and we designed a program called Phone Pals. And back in May, June, we had our pilot. We had 8 couples, a teen and an older adult that were paired up. We based it on interests and just initial conversations with them. And they had weekly phone conversations where they would just connect. And one couple, Marin and Samira, just completely took this to a new level. They started their own book club for 2 because they both loved reading. They would recommend books to each other, read the books, talk about the books at their next phone call. Samira's now at Long Beach State and she still connects with Marin. They're good friends. They text all the time. This is probably a lifelong friendship they created through this work. So that was amazing. We like to pilot and prototype programs first, kind of in a human-centered design effort to see if they work and to get feedback and to see how we can improve them. And I've tried a lot of things over the years. Not all of them become programs, and that's part of my, like the humility I bring to the table, or maybe the work makes me humble is, oh, I have this great idea. Let's try it. And it falls flat. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else, right? That's part of the process. So we're starting another version or another round of Bridging the Years with between 20 and 30 couples this month. And once we kind of tighten it up even a little bit more, we're going to just open it up to the community. And hopefully anyone, any young person or any older person somebody over 60 can be part of this program and can participate. And that'll be something we can offer to the community. I mean, we have a lot of other programs happening. I'm just so pleased by the platform I've been giving at Mentis and the autonomy I've been giving at Mentis to do what I do, and the support I've been given, and our therapists. I mean, they're some of the frontliners during this pandemic. They're seeing utter despair. Our clients are struggling. They're struggling. I mean, our frontliners across the board are struggling. People in faith communities are struggling because it's so hard to carry this heaviness and to hold this heaviness of our community and our congregations, the people we work with. It's hard. And so I think the more we can connect and support each other through this work, not only our youth, but each other, the better we'll be as a community. We're a strong community. And something I think you've probably been talking to my pastor at Crosswalk about, the Interfaith Council, and this conversation about how we can create a greater youth support around spirituality. Because I think that's one thing I see a lot with our young people is they're spiritual, but they need more. Like, they have the capacity and the desire to connect spiritually, but they don't necessarily know how, or they went to a church somewhere where they weren't necessarily fully accepted, or they're hungry for this. They're hungry for this spiritual connection. I think that goes hand in hand with mental health, having a spiritual connection. I found mine when I got sober, right? I was raised Catholic, and then I refound my higher power, reconnected with my higher power when I got sober. And so I think our youth are looking for this sense of spirituality to really enhance their mental health, So,
oh my gosh, thank you so much, Jeni. This is, I mean, there are so many different connections that I've been, like, my mind has just been like going crazy with just there's so many things that you've said that we really needed to hear, and that just so resonate, I think, with kind of where we are on our journey. And I'm thinking especially about like when we meet a young person in the community, to remember that they're most likely struggling with anxiety and depression, that they have so many more pressures on them now than we did probably when we were teens, and than perhaps previous generations. But perhaps, I mean, is the right posture to be one of listening and encouragement? Is there kind of, what advice do you have around that?
Yes, I have a lot of advice around that. Definitely, listening is the number one suggestion I can give you when you are in conversation with a young person. Asking questions that promote conversation, and then listening, and not questions like, where are you going to college, right?
Or what do you want to be?
What do you want to be when you grow up? They hear those questions constantly, and most of them don't know, or they're stressing about the college application process. And I think the pressure they're feeling comes from this need to succeed at everything and be good at everything. And social media has a part in that. Our society has a part in that. Peer pressure has a part in that. Our parents, I asked my kids these questions before I knew better, because you want to know, you want to help them and encourage them and give them something to look forward to and to work towards, right? And now I know better. You don't ask them those questions unless it comes up in conversation and they want to talk about it. Because what's happened is the pressure from all the outside sources have created this level of perfectionism within our teens. So they have their own expectations that they probably will never reach. Maybe they will. Many of them reach them, but they don't see that they reach them, because there's always another level up. They can always do better in their own minds. That's what's happened to our young people, is that they have become perfectionists and never feel like what they do is enough. right? And so asking them questions like, how are you feeling today? What makes, I mean, this sounds silly, but just finding ways to ask them things like, what makes your heart happy? What makes your soul sing? What did you do this week that brought you just pleasure or a sense of peace? Asking them questions about just their person, right? Instead of anything achievement related.
Mhm.
If that comes up, great. Follow that conversation, follow their lead.
Mhm.
Continue asking them questions to help them open up about just who they are as
Mhm.
people, as humans. They want to be treated like adults, right? They don't want to be treated like kids.
Mhm.
They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want answers unless they ask for them. Because I think giving them answers kind of invalidates their feeling of just their feelings.
Mhm.
And so, and then just listening, sometimes just not even, you using all the active listening skills, and you can Google if you don't know, because I am always learning how to be a better listener. I listen to podcasts about how to be a better listener. How do you show that, through connection, like eye contact and body language and certain phrases? Tell me more, how to be a better listener. How did that make you feel? I mean, it sounds kind of therapy-ish, and it kind of is, but that's why therapy works, because that's what therapists do. And I've learned so much from our therapists too at Mentis about how to be a better listener. Listening, validating, inviting them in, right, to conversations. If you're with a group of adults, you invite the young people in and show them that they're on equal footing, right, with the adults in the room, in the community. I think one of the best ways to help give teens meaning and purpose is through service work. So any service opportunity, any opportunity to be of service, whether it's here in the church, in the community, with anything, any kind of outreach you do, gives them that sense of they're giving back, and then they feel ownership.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We had a workshop on listening skills that a couple members of our parish have led, and we've done it a couple times. And each time we do it, something new comes to me, and I learn more, and we kind of practice. And having you say that reminds me, we need to do that again and offer that again, because it's so, you can't do it enough times, because we're so wired to talk and not to ask those kind of deeper follow-up questions. They almost feel inappropriate culturally to kind of ask, well, tell me more about that. Well, what, things like that. And we're sort of used to being like, I'm fine.
Yeah, right.
End of conversation,
Right. And I think it's really important to also, through the art of listening, you learn to recognize signs when you're invited to ask another question to follow up. Because sometimes maybe it's too personal, or they don't want to talk about something, but you learn to read those signs, to read the person you're in communication with. Can I go deeper? And then when, it's just like when our kids were younger, right? Well, I have kids. I don't know if you both are parents, but when they stopped listening, when I was going on, they asked something and I would share and then share more. When they stopped listening or started doing something else, okay, they've reached their limit. They don't need to know anymore. They've gotten their answer. And so it's same with listening, right? It's like, tell me more. And if they just really don't, you don't want to push or pry, you want to respect that. Well, it's so nice. Thank you for sharing with me, or, whatever. Words of encouragement are always really good, because a lot of our teens, especially the ones who really struggle, especially with suicide ideation, they're looking for some kind of hope, right? Instilling hope in any community, working with youth, or any community with youth in any way that you can. Right now, this past 2 years has been just the sea of hopelessness. When are we going to get through this? When are we going to get back to normal? So any kind of instilling of hope, I think, is a good conversation to have, or just finding that thing that makes their heart sing, and talking about it and sharing about it, and relating in a way that is not just taking over and telling your story, but sharing that common interest.
It sounds like to me, it's almost like we need to ask their opinion more often.
Yes.
Right. Like part of our theme for this year is meeting God in each other. And I think like what's at the core of that is that there's something in you that I need for my spiritual journey, because God's brought us together in this moment. I have something to learn from you, and I'm not going to learn it if I don't ask you what you think about things,
right,
or give you the opportunity to share, and really recognizing that the youth has something to teach us, and they see the world in a slightly different way. Each one of them does. And so every opportunity that we have to engage with them in conversation and hear what they think and what they're feeling, it actually changes us too. It helps us to see the world better.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. This work goes right along with your theme. Yeah. Asking their opinion, I mean, they feel they don't get asked their opinion very much. They ask about knowledge that they have to learn in the books for their classes, right? But they don't have a lot of places where they get asked. One of our events last year was called Dear Napa, What Your Teens Want You to Know. And we had 9 teenagers who shared about mental health, identity and intersectionality, and relationships. And they shared some hard stuff, I think, for parents to hear. And the idea of this was some of these teens couldn't talk about these things to their parents. And that's often the case. Teens want their autonomy. They need other adults in their lives they can trust. That's another piece that you can offer, right? Being the other adult, a trusting, authentic adult that a young person can talk to. They couldn't share these things with their parents, but they could share with the greater adult community. So it was a way for parents to, come to this workshop and hear what our teens had to say. Maybe they would understand teens a little bit more that could help them with their own parenting of their teens. It was really amazing. And our kiddos that were part of it were just like, wow, this was incredible to be given this platform and to be just listened to. And then they had breakouts for each of those topics, and the parents and the adults got to ask more questions, and they had an amazing conversations in this workshop. And we want to offer more, chances like that for platforms for them to hear. Maybe you have a platform for teens to share. Maybe one of your speakers instead of another adult is a teen or two. They like to be in couples or together.
Jesus sent them out 2 by 2.
Yeah,
so
there we go.
Well, I definitely have more questions, but I want to give Don an option, and also those of you that are joining us on Zoom, if you have a question, you can feel free to ask it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And thank you for the work you're doing. My wife and I have been involved in the youth program here for many years. And the one thing you talk about that is so important is creating that safe space. And basically, when they come to our meetings, the first thing I tell them is there are certain things that if you share with me, I can't just keep it to myself. I'm a mandated reporter, so I'm very upfront. But I also tell them, but anything else stays in the room that we're in amongst those who are here. And it's amazing that safe space, how that's a craving they have, is that place where they can just unload whatever's on their mind. And it's not that I try and answer or solve their problem, but just listen and support. And they know if they do want advice or answers, they can come to me individually, but it's mostly just listening and amongst their peers for them to hear each other's issues and realize they're not alone in that they're all dealing with stress. They're all dealing with all these social anxieties of whatever's going on with their bodies, whoever they're attracted to, all these things that can weigh them down. So thank you for pointing out and providing that safe space, because that is so important. The other thing you mentioned that I also support is the service project aspect. That we work with an organization called Sierra Service Project. It was founded in a Methodist church. So we do mission trips every summer, and these last 2 years have been just so painful not being able to go. But especially with our kids in Napa who, they may feel bad they don't have the latest iPhone or whatever, but once they go to these communities that are less fortunate and they actually see what poverty looks like, then all of a sudden their perspective on their life changes. And I've seen many eyes opened up and many hearts opened up and realized that it's not important to have the latest iPhone. The important part is taking care of each other.
Absolutely.
One thing I would ask you, if you know of anything, so I do work within San Quentin and meeting with, we call them the men in blue, the inmates, we call them the men in blue. Especially the younger ones, the stories I hear just reaffirm to me that there's always been an opportunity where if the right intervention had happened at the right time, that person's life may have been changed and they would not have ended up in the penal system. And I know as a white male, it's going to be difficult for me to go into some of these neighborhoods and say, here, trust me. So what I'm looking for is those adults that do have that influence in those various communities and how I can support them. Do you know of any network where that opportunity might be available?
Gosh, you locally, you mean?
Yeah, here in Napa, we have huge Latino community, and I'm sure there's many at-risk youth.
Yeah.
And if I can meet the right adult that I can support to help these kids make better decisions. You know, that's sort of where I see my
Yeah,
calling is
okay.
to support that adult.
I will, can I follow up with you and share some resources? There's many great organizations. I mean, Teens Connect is one of a whole lot of really amazing organizations in Napa. We have an awesome nonprofit community, and there are some that work specifically with our Latinx population, and some that work with foster youth, and you know, some that work with LGBTQ youth. And I mean, all the communities where the rates of, you know, trauma are higher, and anxiety and depression. And I would love to follow up and share those with you.
Yeah.
And connect you with the right people.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great work. Are you familiar with Father Greg Boyle?
Yes, very familiar.
Yeah, he's one of my heroes. I met him once, but he wouldn't know who I am. But I just
And that's the type of person I'm looking for, is how do I support him, because he has that connection that I may not be able to develop.
Right.
But if I can fundraise,
Yeah.
whatever support I can provide to help with that mission, then I'm doing my part, even though it's behind the scenes,
Right.
and maybe nobody ever knows about it, and that's fine.
And that's fine, because you really want to support the trusted messengers, right?
Yeah.
That are sharing the word, really. I mean, it really is very spiritual, with our young people that need it. So yeah, he's amazing. I don't know any Father Greg and Napa, Father G. There's a lot of people doing great work though. So yeah, I'd love to connect you.
So how about those who are joining us on Zoom? Dick and Claire, Lisa and Pat, do any of you have any questions?
Well, I want to thank you for what you're doing. 20 years ago, I got involved with the kids in juvenile hall. I miss them highly because of COVID. And I was thinking, can a 16-year-old relate to the teenagers? And I want to tell anybody that's listening, yes, they can relate. And in Napa, all of the kids that have gotten into juvenile hall, the one common thing is lack of an adult to truly interact with. Their parents are busy working 2 and 3 jobs, and just the idea of an adult that will take the time to spend time with them anywhere, anytime, it blows their mind an adult would do that. And I want to thank you for your work.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the work that you did in juvenile hall. That's a community that I would like to start working with at some point as well. Yeah, definitely agree with the one adult in their life, you know, aside from their parents. And you know, to just say, I mean, the parents, some of those parents of those kids have to do what they have to do. They have to work 2 or 3 jobs, right? I mean, we live in a community that barely any of us can afford to live in. It's crazy. And so, you know, there's just this, I don't know, there's a deeper issue, but anytime, any chance we can be that adult for kids, especially, you know, adolescents and teenagers and young adults, you know, we can't forget about the young adults too, because I think a lot of our teens, you know, do all the work they have to do to get to that point of turning 18, being an adult, or getting into college, or, you know, having their independence. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, it's harder now. It's actually harder than being in high school. I have to, you know, work my butt off in college, or I have to work hard to make a living to afford my rent, you know, and then, but all this kind of prep to arriving to being an adult, and then then it's harder. And many who move away have lost their support systems. So, you know, one of my favorite psychiatrists, he's an author, speaker, psychiatrist, Dr. Dan Siegel, says that adolescence actually lasts until 25, 26. Mm-hmm. So when I'm developing a program now for young adults, right, to help kind of, especially the ones who go through my program in high school, help them transition through adulthood as well. So that they can then come give back and give to the younger people. I see this sort of cycle, right, of giving and peer mentoring. You know, I really struggled as a teen, and the work I do continues to help heal my teenager. When I never was in juvenile hall, but I was in a hospital for mental health concerns. And my parents did everything they knew how, but the problem was so much bigger, and I didn't have that person in my life that I needed, right? And so a lot of times I say the programs I'm designing today I'm designing programs I needed as a teen, and all of our teens need that trusted adult, that one person that believes in them no matter what. Even if they mess up, you're going to have their back. You're going to be there for them. You're not going to abandon them, you know?
Mhm. Awesome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for your work. I'm the library media technician at Napa High, and there's been many times where I have students come in that just say, I need to talk. And I always have a chair and a desk near my desk, and they can sit and they just talk to me about what's going on. And I can tell you this pandemic has really affected, especially the high schoolers' mental health. But a lot of times they just want somebody to listen. And I just sit there and listen, and I've been participating for years in community counseling and stuff. And sometimes they just want an ear, and there is quite a bit of tension and anxiety right now with the PSAT tests and the SAT tests being done. And I just say, you just have to breathe and just remember you can only do your best. So thank you for your work.
Thank you for your work. You're one of those people, and at their campus where there's such, where they need that support sometimes to get through the day, to get through a class period, right? And bless our teachers and our school counselors, but they have so much on their plate. They can't be that person for every single student. I mean, our academic counselors have they have too many students. I mean, we need like 3 times, 4 times, 5 times as many counselors on the school campuses. So you are one of those people that they can go to and sit down, and they know it's safe, and they know they can talk to you. And I really am grateful that you're there on campus.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I had another question.
Okay.
So I know from talking to the young people in my life that pronoun norms are changing and are especially important in this younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's a real generational gap that some older folks are having difficulty both understanding but also being able to embrace. So I always try to encourage people to ask young people what pronouns they prefer.
Mm-hmm.
Is that and the folks that you're talking to, the young people you're talking to, is that something they appreciate also?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. We all, on my Zoom name, I have my pronouns, they have their
Mhm.
pronouns. The first couple of times we met as a teen council, we introduced ourselves with our pronouns, so we all knew. And we have a variety of pronouns in our group. We have a high percentage of LGBTQ. We have, as I mentioned, our teen council is very diverse. And I have she, her on my email signature as well. So any opportunity you can share your pronoun and invites others to share theirs. If you're not able to ask, that means, like I said, email communication, any kind of visual communication, so that it's just out there. And they know that you're an accepting person. Another thing I recommend maybe is LGBTQ Connection offers a training about pronouns and
Great.
sexuality.
Mhm.
So they might be somebody you want to invite to speak. One of our two of our teen council members are also on the LGBTQ Connection youth leadership team. One former council is now a project coordinator, I think, for them. And so they love training, giving trainings about this very subject. And I try to take them like every year or two, because this is always changing and growing and evolving. And it's important for me, especially in the work I do, to keep up. And I think anyone who works with youth or has young people in their community, to keep up with language. Language really matters.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if there are any other questions for those of you that are joining us on Zoom, pop it in the chat or wave at me, and I'll call on you. But I want to kind of for a final question to ask you how we can support as a congregation, as individuals, how we can support the work of Teens Connect and Mentis.
Thank you so much. First of all, that's a really good question. I have adults ask me a lot how they can help with our work, and I think, I will put you on my list for anything that might come up, because when that idea gets introduced into my head, often months down the road, I'll find a project that I need support with. But really, we have a pretty diverse youth resource database on our website, mentisnapa.org/youth, that has all the other organizations in town that are doing work with youth, from the library to volunteer opportunities, all the way to crisis resources. So anytime, something that I'm always needing support with is sharing resources with our young people, because I get more than dozens of calls every week from not only teens, but parents and adults who need help with their teens. And it's a lot for me to hold. And so anytime I can get help and support in sharing the information about all the organizations and resources that are out there, the better. So even putting that database, sharing it in your newsletter. I mean, I know it
Yeah.
sounds funny. That's something
No, that would be great.
small.
We have a link for support that's right at the top
Wonderful.
of our newsletter. So I'd love to add more resources to that.
That would be amazing because a lot of people find their way to me through friends and through other people who know I do this work. So really helping me hold that would be incredible. And then, you know, if there are any, like if we ever have any service opportunities that we're opening, like this Bridging the Years, once that goes bigger, maybe there's people in your congregation that want to be part of it. The young people or the people over 60, maybe they want to be part of it, you know, when we kind of launch it into the community next year. So I'll keep you posted.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's anything more specific.
Wonderful.
Thank you for asking.
Well, thank you so much, Jeni. And it's just the story, the way that you told your own story and how it was that you came to this work was so inspiring. And I think especially in the place that we're at, as we're the word discernment is something that I wrote about in my email to the parish this weekend, and just the need to think about and really and look for and pray for opportunities that God is drawing us to. And so hearing other people's stories of how they've done that in their own life helps each one of us to remember to look for those in our own lives and to find the path that God is drawing us towards. So so thank you so much. And I know folks will be watching this video later, and I'm so glad that we've been able to record this conversation, because I think that you've just brought us such a gift today. So thank you so much.
And if anybody has questions after they watch it tonight, you have my email address, so you can share that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And I'll put the website link also in the YouTube description.
Wonderful. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.